The modern game. Excedrin headache 101. Pet peeve, top 10 list. Very, very often I hear that, the modern game. I like to sum it up this way. The game has evolved, but the game has not changed. The dimensions of the court have remained the same. Physical laws remain the same. If you believe in gravity, you believe in stroke production. I think one thing that takes place in tennis is we don't have enough appreciation for the history of the game, players from the past. I always talk about Ken Rosewall in 1954 was in the Wimbledon final. 1974, he was in the Wimbledon final. He played against Jimmy Connors. Jimmy Connors went from 74, he didn't go quite out to 94, but 1991, he was knocking on the door to be in another final. You got to the semis of the U.S. Open. So you take two players, 1954, almost all the way out to 1994. Two players, almost 40 years. You could throw Agassi in that mix, and those are three great players that stayed very close to the baseline. And that's one reason of many that had such long careers. But all you have to do is go back and look at film. I mean, Rod Laver, for example, who won the Grand Slam twice, he was great. And we'll show you some film of Rod Laver. But I think especially for a young coach who's in their 20s, they haven't even taught 5 years, I think someone has to teach 10 years before they really have a handle and really are perhaps a master or a qualified teacher of the game. But for a young coach to say, well, I teach the modern game, I just find there's a lot of problems with that. There's not enough appreciation, history of the game, and there's some things that players are doing today that they could learn from that players years ago would do. In other words, to go forward. Years ago at Wimbledon, everything is circumstantial. I mean, they didn't get the tarps over the grass as fast. Players were wearing spikes. 3 of the 4 Grand Slams were on grass. Yeah, players came to the net more. When it comes down to the rackets have changed. So conditions, equipment, there has been change, no doubt. But when it comes down to the modern game, the game is the game. You know, if someone were to tell you, well, I know tennis, I know the pro game. The game is the game. The racket face is open whether you're playing, you know, a rinky-dink local tournament or you're playing a Grand Slam tournament. The ball goes the way it goes. So I think really when it comes down to people just need to know the game. They don't need to be imposters and masquerade and say, well, I teach the modern game. That comes back to the term old school, new school. There is no school. In 1981, as I mentioned, we set up a program where you could get a degree in tennis teaching. But I would say for the most part, people don't go to school. They just kind of pick up the racket and start to teach. But when it comes down to someone saying, well, the modern game, if someone says that, I just want to ask, how much understanding do they have for the history of the game when they start talking about the modern game? Because the game, in the end, it has evolved. It certainly has changed. But to say that it just radically changed and there's a total disconnect between what great players did in a previous era and what they're doing now, that's totally wrong.